You mentioned you were at a conference recently.
Yes.
And this happened right after the recent denial of the port visits. Did that change the tone of the conference at all?
It changed it less than I thought it would. And by the way, I was at a conference in Taiwan and then a conference here. So I've heard a lot of people talk this issue out from every direction. And yet I thought that it would have a bigger effect. In my presentation, which happened to be on humanitarian assistance at this conference in Newport, I raised it, raising the issue of if we had had maritime cooperation, better maritime cooperation, and done humanitarian assistance exercises, maybe it was less likely that we would have gotten into this little disruption in the relationship. So that was the way I was trying to put a positive face on it. Yes, it did come up, but it did not have a blunting effect. I was afraid that it would sort of overcome the agenda of the conference. Instead, we did talk very seriously about the prospects for maritime cooperation between our navies. And I remember showing on my final PowerPoint slide the bumper sticker that says, PLA and U.S. Navy partners on the high seas, and no one booed. So
a good
anyway.
sign. So what do you think the immediate future holds for maritime cooperation? What is the next step?
Well, I have to say first that there's a little understandable hesitancy now. Even if China has decided that they've made their point. And by the way, the point's been made to me, this is not between our navies. So I think there is readiness among many for us to move forward, but we'll have to see how quickly the new Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Roughhead, and Admiral Keating and others, maybe I should include the White House in that, are ready to move forward. But it seems to me that this should not be a major obstacle. We've certainly overcome much more difficult obstacles than this in the past. And so the next thing probably would be something like humanitarian assistance exercises. And then, of course, I'm not hoping that there's another real disaster, but in the next one that we're ready to cooperate. Maybe some more consideration about China's possible participation in the Global Maritime Partnership, and see if there are questions that can be answered. But even if that somehow falters, it seems to me that both capitals need to understand that maritime cooperation between these two countries in this very important bilateral relationship is something that we need to find a way to do. We can say that there are obstacles and we can point to all the difficulties. We need to be finding the common interest and to proceed and let this be a part of our overall bilateral relationship. And China and the U.S., in my view and that of others, is sort of a burgeoning strategic relationship now. I mean, think of the six-party talks with North Korea and the way we've come together a bit on terrorism and so forth. So it seems to me that the overall relationship is ready to take another step, and that another building block will help. It won't be trouble-free, it never is, but it seems to me that's what we should be looking to do.
Okay, you've mentioned not only having both navies ready to take the next step, but also Beijing and Washington. With a new administration coming in the next year, how do you think that might affect or change maritime cooperation? Will it have an effect?
I certainly can't forecast who either the next president will be or what the policy will be. It is my hope, and I think a realistic one, that either party could find that it serves our interest to proceed on maritime cooperation and to continue to work together on the six-party talks and so forth. And by the way, the maritime cooperation does have a big naval component, but it also includes things like general safety at sea, even maybe the cooperation on oceanography, scientific research, extraction from the seabed resources, any number of things that you can think about. So it doesn't have to do with just navies.
Okay.
Maritime cooperation can be much broader, and most of those subjects are ones that we're not, that are not sensitive, that we're not squabbling about. Some of them are moderately so, but anyway, that it's opportunities in a much broader spectrum than just navies working together.
Okay. Beyond maritime cooperation, what other security issues do you see on the horizon between the U.S. and China?
Always the dark cloud on the horizon is Taiwan, and regardless of what we think we're talking about, the Chinese are at least thinking about, if not talking about, Taiwan. I think that's, we've been reminded of that again with this, the port visit denials, that it was probably exasperation over Taiwan arms sales and their concern about what might happen in Taiwan, whether it's overblown or not, that brought that to mind. There are people who view China as expansionist, aggressive, and so forth. I don't think I've been co-opted. I don't think that's a likely outcome. Okay. Yes, China has claims in the South China Sea, and it wishes to extract seabed resources in the East China Sea, and there are those disputes to resolve. But I think that the future does not hold any realistic prospect other than the Taiwan issue for some sort of conflict, for an adversarial relationship. Instead, I think security issues do hold something like working together for sea lane security, for anti-piracy, anti-terrorism, combating smuggling, doing all these sorts of things together. And so when I see some of the modernization that's happening at the PLA Navy, I don't want to be altogether relaxed about it. We certainly have to hedge. We have to be ready, realizing we could be in a confrontation with China, but we could also be in a very cooperative relationship. And for example, there's talk of China building an aircraft carrier. Well, it's possible, looking at that from one slant, to say, yes, China needs an aircraft carrier if it has to protect its sea lanes in something like the Indian Ocean. So you see, that's a little bit different than saying, there's another threat from the Chinese, but rather saying that's an understandable thing that you would expect a China concerned with energy security to want to have what I call organic air present in some sort of small aircraft carrier that would allow them to do that sort of thing. I hope that that's the way that things will develop. And I should add one point. It's not in concrete where China is going and what China's intentions are. We have a good chance of influencing that sort of thing. So how things turn out as to whether a stronger China with a modernized PLA is a more dangerous China is not an independent variable. It's something that we can influence the outcome of, and that should be one of our long-term goals.